What if the most powerful family in Britain wasn't just surrounded by diamonds and diplomacy, but also Tupperware, poisoned pillowcases, and banned board games? Behind the palace gates lies a world stranger than fiction, where every royal rule is a story and every tradition borders on the absurd. This isn't the history they teach in school. This is the weird, the petty, the gloriously human side of royalty. So buckle your seatbelt, unless you're the king, in which case, you don't need one. These are 17 of the weirdest British royal stories that are totally, unbelievably true. Before we dive headfirst into centuries of royal weirdness, make sure you're subscribed, because this isn't your average history lesson. And we've got plenty more where this came from. And while you're here, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Are you binging this at 3 a.m. like a true night owl? Or sneaking it in on your lunch break like a rebellious courtier? 1. Henry VIII's bed linen poison test. In the Tudor court, paranoia wasn't just a personality flaw. It was survival instinct dressed in silk. And no one wore it quite as extravagantly as Henry VIII. The man who devoured wives like political snacks was also convinced someone was trying to do the same to him, with poison. Not in the goblet, not in the roast goose, but in the linens. Every morning, Henry's bedchamber became a bizarre scene of ceremonial kissing. The pillows, blankets, and sheets, any fabric touched by his gentleman bedmaker, had to be kissed. Not as a sign of reverence. No, this wasn't courtly affection. It was proof they weren't laced with poison. Presumably, if the servant keeled over mid-peck, the king would sleep somewhere else. Or maybe just have someone else kiss it again, for confirmation. This was royal quality control at its weirdest. Pre-industrial paranoia wrapped in 800 thread count embroidered cotton. It's unclear if this ever saved his life, or just ruined his trust in duvets. But the ritual tells you everything you need to know about Henry. Lethal to his enemies, terrified of his blankets. And the irony? He died obese, ulcered, and paranoid in his own bed, untouched by poison. But he wasn't the only monarch whose survival habits aged like milk. His daughter took things a step further, straight into the realm of toxic beauty. 2. Elizabeth I's toxic makeup and monthly bathing. Elizabeth I, or the so-called Virgin Queen, reigned for over 4 decades. But her face told a different story. One of calculated deception, chemical warfare, and, quite possibly, lead poisoning. After surviving smallpox in 1562, she was left with pitted scars that no queen in a portrait-loving court could afford to display. So she turned to the elixir of false perfection, Venetian ceruse. This was not your average makeup. It was a lethal blend of white lead and vinegar, slathered on daily until her skin became more canvas than flesh. Under the paint, lesions, sores, decay. But above it, power, myth, and pale divinity. It was beauty by way of chemical disguise, and everyone played along. You didn't mention the smell. You didn't ask why her skin seemed increasingly corpse-adjacent. And then there was her hygiene, or lack thereof. The queen reportedly bathed once a month, maybe, in a world where water was feared and perfume was armor. This wasn't unusual. But imagine a royal court caked in powder, drenched in musk, sweating through layers of velvet. Now imagine them doing it again next month. Still, Elizabeth endured. A sovereign sealed in white, a mask that fooled everyone, except time. And while she painted herself into history, her descendants found more inventive ways to prove they were still alive, like getting weighed before and after Christmas dinner. And just like that, Elizabeth traded one kind of mask for another. Powdered poison for royal perfection. Strange? Absolutely. But we've barely scratched the surface. If you're into the bizarre side of history, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, drop a comment below. Where are you tuning in from, and what time is it on your end? Midnight mystery binge or accidental lunchtime rabbit hole? 3. Weigh in before and after Christmas dinner. At Sandringham, the Christmas spirit comes with stuffing, sentiment, and a weigh-in. Not just any weigh-in. A ceremonial pre- and post-dinner measurement on a pair of antique scales to ensure that royal guests had, quite literally, enjoyed themselves. Gain weight, and you've shown respect. Stay the same, and you might as well have insulted the chef. This tradition supposedly dates back to King Edward VII, a man with a legendary appetite and an even greater fondness for rituals that combined gluttony with guilt. Nothing says happy holidays like public body mass scrutiny in a palace. Picture it. Members of one of the world's most secretive institutions stepping on a scale in full view of their extended family. All smiles, no pressure. Just a monarchy gauging merriment by the pound. It's absurd, it's charming, it's deeply weird. Of course no one talks about the numbers. Or what happens if you don't gain enough. Is there a polite royal punishment? A bonus pudding? A duchess quietly disappointed in your metabolism? Whatever the case, this royal practice has outlived monarchs, wars, and political crises. And unlike some other customs, it never ends in argument, probably because no one's allowed to bring Monopoly. 4. Board game ban, no Monopoly allowed. In a palace where everyone already owns all the property, it makes perfect sense that Monopoly would be banned. Officially, the reason is that it gets too vicious. And coming from a family whose history involves coups, decapitations, and generations of quiet seething at dinner tables, that's saying something. According to reports, Prince Andrew once let it slip that the game was prohibited in the royal household because things got a bit too competitive. You'd think being literal heirs to a vast empire would cool the capitalist instincts. Apparently not. Whether it was backstabbing over Mayfair or someone flipping the board after being bankrupted by their cousin, Monopoly brought out a side of the Windsors best left unpublished. But what's truly amusing is the idea that, after centuries of political scheming, family rivalries, and subtle insults served under silver domes, it was a plastic top hat and some fake money that proved too dangerous. Somewhere between royal protocol and Parker Brothers, the Crown drew the line. And so, Monopoly remained shelved, probably next to Scrabble and beneath a portrait of someone who once taxed entire colonies. But while the board games are packed away, the dress code never falters, especially when it comes to little boys and their very specific shorts. 5. Boys wearing shorts. Until age 8. No, Prince George isn't stuck in a time warp. Yes, he's wearing shorts. And no, it's not because he outgrew his trousers during a growth spurt at Kensington Palace. In royal circles, little boys don't wear pants. Not until they're at least 8 years old. Anything earlier would be, well, suburban. This peculiar fashion rule has its roots in the upper echelons of British aristocracy, where status was stitched into every inch of fabric. Long trousers were once the marker of the working class, a bit too mature, a bit too middle management. Shorts, on the other hand, signaled that a boy was still in the safe bubble of posh childhood, unbothered by such vulgar things as manual labor or public school rugby. The real kicker? This isn't law, just deep-rooted tradition. But in the royal family, tradition often trumps practicality. Even in the middle of a chilly British march, those knobby knees are out for public display, often next to a meticulously ironed blazer and a 1,000-yard stare of someone told not to run on the gravel. And speaking of rules no one voted for, if you ever meet a royal, don't stick your hand out first, unless you want to breach a centuries-old etiquette over breakfast canapes. 6. Royal handshake etiquette. Don't offer yours first. Let's say you've won the genetic lottery. You're at a garden party. A duke is nibbling a biscuit near the begonias. The monarch is approaching. Your instincts say, extend a hand, stop right there. In royal etiquette, there's one golden rule. They initiate. You do not touch the monarch. You do not offer your hand. You wait. Politely, like a statue, one that's vaguely sweating. This custom isn't just a quirk, it's an unspoken boundary drawn in centuries of protocol and powdered wigs. It preserves the mystique, the distance, the curated theater of monarchy. Royals decide when contact is acceptable. You, dear commoner, do not. Of course, not all royals follow this strictly. Diana famously broke it with hugs. Harry and Meghan blurred the line even more. But for most of the firm, particularly the late Queen and now King Charles, this was choreography. A handshake wasn't just a greeting, it was a performance. You were chosen, even if briefly. And if you think that's a bit dramatic for a limb gesture, wait until you hear about the royal dress code for funerals. Or rather, the dress code for any possible funeral. Because when you're royal, death is always on the packing list. 7. The color black. Worn only for mourning, but always packed anyway. In the royal wardrobe, black is not just a fashion choice, it's a signal flare. You don't wear it unless someone important has died. And yet, paradoxically, every royal must always travel with a black outfit just in case. It's the most somber version of hope for the best, pack for the worst. This tradition was cemented in 1952 when Elizabeth, then a princess, was in Kenya and received news that her father, King George VI, had passed. She had no black dress to wear upon arrival in London, so she stayed on the plane until one was brought aboard, changed mid-air, and only then stepped out onto the tarmac. From that moment, protocol dictated, black is always in the suitcase, whether you're going to a state dinner or a safari. It's a strange balance. Royalty must look celebratory, dignified, and completely non-apocalyptic at all times, but also prepared for national mourning at a moment's notice. That duality lives in every travel bag and every silent valet who triple-checks the zipper on the just-in-case suit. But some customs are even stranger than traveling with emergency grief wear, like driving royal cars without licenses, plates, or really any legal justification at all. 8. Being allowed to drive without a license. For the monarch. Only one person in Britain can legally drive without a license. And no, it's not a rebellious teen in a Range Rover, it's the sovereign. The law, in its delightfully archaic British way, doesn't require the monarch to hold a driving license, vehicle registration, or even license plates. Because in a legal sense, the law flows from the crown, so it doesn't really apply to the crown. A neat little circle of logic that somehow lets a head of state speed down a Scottish country road in a Land Rover without so much as a learner's permit. Queen Elizabeth II was famously fond of driving herself, sometimes grinning behind the wheel like someone who knew she was breaking a rule she technically created. There are photos of her gleefully piloting military-grade jeeps and estate cars, often without a seatbelt and always without a license plate. It wasn't rebellion, it was tradition. Charles has inherited the car keys and the loophole, although whether he takes the wheel with the same zest remains uncertain. Still, if you thought that was a peculiar royal habit, wait until you meet the king who skips lunch, travels with his own breakfast box, and makes porridge an existential experience. 9. Charles III's breakfast box and minimal lunch habit. King Charles III doesn't do lunch. He considers it a luxury, which might sound almost humble until you see what he does eat, and how he travels with it like a medieval alchemist with very strong opinions about muesli. According to former royal staff, Charles has a custom-made breakfast box that accompanies him everywhere, containing his favorite teas, granola, dried fruit, and occasionally a boiled egg, with very specific yolk softness, of course. His morning routine is so precise, it borders on religious ceremony. Everything measured, prepped, portioned. He's the kind of man who probably knows exactly how many pumpkin seeds go into his yogurt, and whether they were harvested under a waxing or waning moon. Skipping lunch isn't laziness, it's strategy. Charles reportedly likes to power through the day without a midday meal, which probably saves time but leaves one wondering, what happens if he gets peckish around 3 p.m.? Does the breakfast box return like a divine snack intervention? Whatever the answer, his daily routine paints a picture of intense discipline, a touch of royal fussiness, and the quiet panic of a chef who forgets to pack the dried figs. But food aside, there's another royal tradition even stranger than breakfast on wheels, a bedtime rule that turns everyone into hostages of royal sleep schedules. 10. No one can go to bed until the monarch does. Imagine you're a guest at Balmoral or Windsor. You've had 3 courses, 2 awkward conversations with a viscount, and you're nodding off into your second sherry. You look at the clock, 11:45 p.m., and think, surely it's time to slip away. But no, the Queen is still awake. Which means you are too. This old-school royal rule, especially under Queen Elizabeth II, dictated that no one could retire for the night until the monarch had gone to bed. Not even close family. It wasn't enforced with guards at the hallway, but through an ironclad expectation of etiquette. Going to bed before the monarch was considered bad manners, borderline offensive. A subtle rebellion wrapped in pajamas. The Queen, as it turns out, was a night owl. She enjoyed reading state papers, writing letters, or occasionally watching late-night TV. Her guests, on the other hand, were often left clinging to their teacups and smiling with the dead eyes of those trapped in formality. You didn't yawn. You didn't check your watch. You just waited. For her footsteps, her goodnight nod, the royal retreat that finally released you into your own bed. But the strangest part? Some say she relaxed more in Scotland, where bedtime rules gave way to Tupperware. 11. Buggy in bed at Balmoral. Royals let their hair down. When the royal family escapes to Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands, something bizarre happens. They act normal, or at least their version of it. Gone are the tiaras, the trumpets, the finely choreographed handshake parades. In their place, raincoats, barbecues, and fruit stored in plastic Tupperware. It's where Queen Elizabeth was said to be her happiest, where she drove her own Land Rover, grilled sausages herself with the help of Prince Philip, and let the corgis run wild like they owned the place, which legally they sort of did. Stories from Balmoral often sound like royal fan fiction. The Queen offering tea from an old thermos, Prince Charles in tweed, tending to plants, even the odd hill hike or games of charades in the drawing room. One guest recalled being served scones off a paper napkin. Another saw fruit salad emerge not from silver dishes, but a plain plastic box with a lid that barely fit. It's absurd, and it's real. Behind closed castle doors, the monarchy occasionally drops the act, not entirely, but just enough to feel like a real family. One that occasionally laughs, eats with their hands, and yes, still dresses for dinner. Of course, even their downtime is laced with eccentricity, especially when it comes to hygiene. 12. Ancient and curious medical, hygienic practices. The British royals, especially the pre-modern ones, had some routines that would make a medieval barber blush. Hygiene was more art than science, and often the art of not bathing. The court's approach to medicine and cleanliness read more like a horror novella with velvet drapes. Elizabeth I famously bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not. And when she did, it wasn't exactly spa day. It involved a lot of labor, scented cloths, and whispered prayers that she wouldn't catch a chill and die. Her face, as we know, was a minefield of lead-based makeup. Her teeth, blackened by sugar and time, considered fashionable by some, alarming by everyone else. Henry VIII's era brought other quirks. Pomanders to ward off disease, basically perfume balls on chains. Urine as a diagnostic tool, yes, doctors tasted it. And medical theories that involved balancing the humors, which mostly meant bloodletting. For royalty, every odd ache came with an entourage of apothecaries, astrologers, and well-meaning quacks. These weren't just weird habits. They were survival strategies in an era where doctors were dangerous and soap was suspicious. And if all of that sounds risky, imagine what happens when 2 heirs to the throne get on the same airplane. That's when royal protocol hits cruising altitude. 13. Every royal traveling heir must not fly together. Most families worry about delayed flights, cramped seats, or someone forgetting their passport. But when you're royal, travel planning involves a different kind of checklist, like making sure 2 future kings aren't on the same plane. It's an unwritten but very real protocol. Senior royal heirs should not fly together. The logic is painfully obvious. Preserve the line of succession. If something tragic were to happen mid-air, the monarchy must have a backup plan. The throne cannot suffer turbulence. In practice, this means that once a royal child reaches a certain age, usually school age or older, he or she is expected to travel separately from their heir parent. Prince William and Prince George have occasionally flown together in modern times, but always with asterisks, waivers, or public hand-wringing. It's not law, but tradition leans heavy. The royal press office usually skirts the question when asked, but behind the scenes, insurance policies and succession charts dance nervously every time a shared boarding pass is printed. One wrong flight plan, and you've got a constitutional crisis with no refreshments. Still, even when traveling apart, heirs remain bound by another quirky royal wrinkle. Because in this family, even birthdays come in pairs. 14. The monarch's birthday is celebrated twice. If you've ever forgotten a birthday, here's a monarch-approved hack. Have two. The British sovereign officially celebrates their birthday twice each year. Once on their actual birth date, and again on a chosen official birthday, typically in June. Why? The weather. Really? Edward VII, born in November, hated having soggy parades, so he invented the summer birthday to guarantee blue skies for the Trooping the Color ceremony. It stuck. Since then, every monarch has played along, regardless of their real birth date. For Elizabeth II, the real birthday was April 21st. The official one? A rotating Saturday in June, chosen for maximum pomp, horses, and flyovers. Charles III, a Scorpio by birth, now gets the same treatment. One party for the family, one for the cameras. It's a monarchist twist on having your cake and eating it twice. One celebration is intimate, likely involving tea, spaniels, and discreet toasts. The other is a full-scale PR operation. Military formations, red uniforms, golden carriages, and people pretending not to be cold in summer dresses. And while double birthdays are impressive, the royals are even more meticulous about their day-to-day image, including, say, ironing their shoelaces. Yes, really. 15. Wardrobe details. Ironed shoelaces and multiple tie changes. There's high maintenance and then there's royal maintenance. Among the most peculiar details from behind palace doors is the claim, persistent, amusing, and only slightly disputed, that Charles III, then Prince, had his shoelaces ironed. Not just cleaned, not replaced. Ironed, pressed flat and smooth, presumably to ensure no unsightly crinkles ruined the visual perfection of his Oxford brogues. It sounds like satire. It might even be. But numerous former staff have repeated the detail enough to suggest at least one pair of shoelaces, somewhere, was gently steamed into submission. And the tie changes? Absolutely real. Charles has been known to carry multiple ties throughout the day, swapping them as he moves from event to event. It's not vanity, it's uniform. Each public appearance is a statement, and the statement must match the room. Somber for a hospital visit, bold for a charity gala, neutral for a factory tour. In the world of royal image control, every crease matters. And if you think a wrinkled tie is embarrassing, imagine what happens when you're still chewing your roast beef and the monarch puts down their fork. Because in royal dining rooms, timing is everything. 16. Royal dining rules. When the monarch finishes, everyone stops. Picture a grand royal banquet. Chandeliers glittering, silverware laid out with military precision, and waitstaff who've trained their entire lives to refill your water glass without being seen. Everything is perfect. Except for one tiny problem. You're still hungry. Unfortunately, the Queen has just put down her fork. And that means you're done too. This curious custom is one of the more quietly ruthless elements of royal dining etiquette. When the monarch stops eating, so does everyone else. It doesn't matter if you're halfway through your pheasant or just opened your mouth to fork in some pudding. Once the royal fork rests, it's game over. Cutlery down, mouth shut, dignified starvation begins. The rule isn't usually enforced with scowls or declarations. It's just tradition, deeply ingrained in the choreography of royal dining. Everyone knows the cue. The sovereign decides the pace of the meal, and the rest of the table follows, like actors in a play where the queen is both lead and director. Of course, there are whispered stories of guests sneaking a final bite or two when no one's looking. But make no mistake, the dinner table, in this world, is just another stage where power plays out in porcelain. And if that sounds over the top, just wait until you hear what else the royals bring to the table, literally, like their very own toilet seat. 17. Royal Gadget Item Pack-Up. Bringing your own toilet seat. Legend? When you've got palaces, private trains, and enough titles to fill a filing cabinet, you start getting picky about the details. That's how we arrive at one of the most infamous and weirdly persistent claims about King Charles III, that he travels with his own personal toilet seat. Yes, a toilet seat. Padded, familiar, royal. Some former staffers and tell-all books have alleged that during official visits, the king's team unpacks more than just suits and cufflinks. Alongside the monogrammed toothbrush might be his preferred lavatory setup, plus a specific brand of soft triple-ply toilet paper marked with royal initials. Naturally. Now, official spokespeople have denied the claim, but like all good royal rumors, it sticks. Partly because it fits so well into the pattern of hyper-curated comfort the royals are known for, and partly because, well, who wouldn't want their own seat when traveling between 500-year-old castles with plumbing that predates electricity? True or not, the story remains the crown jewel of royal eccentricities. It's the perfect ending, slightly absurd, impossible to verify, and just dignified enough to be real. Because in the strange, ritual-heavy, and occasionally Tupperware-filled world of British royalty, reality is always just a few degrees away from satire.